Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome back to Transformation Every Day. My name is Alexander Greb. I'm Consulting Director at CBS Corporate Business Solutions, and this is the podcast where we dive into the ever-shifting world of enterprise transformation. In this episode, we are joined by a hugely popular SAP visionary and giant, Sven Denecken, Chief Marketing and Solutions Officer for Industries at SAP. Sven returns to the mic to share powerful insights on how industries are evolving, where disruption is speeding up, and why AI in industries are more relevant than ever. From healthcare to high-tech, from digital twins to data ecosystems, Sven gives us a front-row seat to what's changing, what's accelerating, and what leaders need to do now to stay ahead. So buckle up, it's time to talk strategy, transformation, and the future of industries with Sven Denecken. Only here on Transformation Every Day. Much of the industry development is now part of the S4 again. Where do you see the future of the industry cloud in that area?
I think it is still one of the key differentiators, because especially if you look at it from the customer side, the industries they operate in define some of their core business. Well, we'll talk about that later. I think lines are blurring as well. So in that sense, for me, it was always made sense. And in times where data is so precious, make even more sense is to be close to the core. The business process touches the core, and the industry differentiating needs to be very close to the core. So setting organizations aside to understand where the main business processes are has always been a key point to develop good industry differentiation.
And another key point is that we are recording. We have Sven Denecken here.
There we go, top 3.
Perfect. Also, we got here Johannes again.
Hey,
good to have
everybody.
You.
Good to be here again.
And we are talking about industries today because, Sven, since a few years, your role is taking care of the industries within SAP. And I remember back then when we had our last recording, it was around 5 years ago in 2020. We called it back then the year of artificial intelligence. Concerning your industry view now, were we a bit early? And would you have expected back then what is possible now?
I don't think we have been early because automation is always something that was there, was striking. The question how we did it and what technology can achieve, that is definitely not a surprise, but it's even more than that. It is breathtaking sometimes what is possible. But the art of the possible always needs to have founding. And that again, I think, yes, we might be early to get interest of many people. But the people who understand where margins come from, where efficiency comes from, they understood that automation is the name of the game. I think all of us know, meanwhile, using it privately, of course, that we, again, have the same expectation to our workplace, to our businesses, to the companies we collaborate with. So it has been there, but super pleasant surprise how fast it has evolved.
Speaking, just touching on the automation that you just brought up and efficiency, a lot of conversations that I have with customers now is really centered around that. But don't you think that just efficiency and automation is a little bit too short-sighted? Is there more when it comes to AI from your perspective, and especially from an industry perspective?
Definitely it is, but it needs to start somewhere. And I think to really deliver on some of those promises, which maybe sometimes didn't come through, right? We all had expectations. We were rejuvenizing our enterprises, the way how we develop, the way how our consumers, means our customers use our solution. Was the promise always fulfilled? I think it brings us much closer to that. But we might talk about that later. There's also new things possible, which we didn't see before. And that's maybe where you're alluding to. That is something where we were still thinking in those chevrons on a PowerPoint, like, step 1, 2, 3. And at the beginning, and HANA was the same, I think we compressed it and made it faster. Then with S4, we started to change the processes that were different. And now you can actually redesign on the fly. That would be my analogy, where I think topics are possible that I didn't see before.
What are those topics and those developments that did surprise you most?
I
Because
think
normally your visions are always hitting to the point. Yeah.
no, I will tell. But what I see is three different topics. Number one, and that has been proven before by many other, it will be ubiquitous. So the application of newer technology and the wish, I can tell you my anecdote a little bit later, how I learned and understood that this is a changing game. It will be there. So respecting that, and the question is, how far can you go? And topics around the value chain are getting much more interesting, not just looking at the gates of your company, or you are in an industry and then you do a little bit retail, so boundaries that are blurring. I think it goes far beyond that. And across the value chain, the collaboration, the importance even of data there. And that is something which I see breathtaking speed again. And the last but not least is another example I saw in some industries, the digital twin. Very costly, very cumbersome to pull it off. Just one of our co-innovation work that we do with NVIDIA with the software and that part. The price of digital twins will go down tremendously. And that it doesn't mean that you just have a digital twin of a product or a digital twin of your factory. You have a digital twin of your business. And applying new technology, new ideas, new endeavors to that digital twin is something that I see in the future will, based on that flow, on that speed of AI, will come. It's around the corner.
When we look at the disruption and transformation that is happening at the moment, and the news again are full of them every day. Yeah, especially automotive industry is now very noisy in its way of changing. Do you think that that pace that is happening now is faster, or is it just noisier?
I love that question because sometimes pace doesn't go without noise. Pace is something uncomfortable for many people because they're actually either still in the situation of a change and then they want to take a breath, but change is a constant. And who knows that better than companies in IT business? Second, if something moves ahead and you're trying to catch up, you sometimes do the mistake, you follow the noise.
Yeah.
So I think it's a double-edged sword. And you mentioned one of my favorite industries. Of course, I'm German, so it's automotive industry. But imagine what we did with the data ecosystems due to disruption before. If that would not be in place, how would you catch up with the disruptions that are coming now? Everyone feels it's just a faster pace. But if you look back a little bit, and I'm happy that we're recording it podcast and not as a video podcast, so a lot of long hair, and I'm the old geek here in the threesome. So I think we learned a lot that there was always change, just it feels faster, and part of that is the noise. The next cool thing that makes a lot of noise. But those changes have been there before, and I think it is good for leaders like we are and experts to sometimes calm down and apply where it makes sense.
So which industries do you see the biggest level of disruption at the moment, besides the obvious automotive shift that is happening?
Yeah, so first of all, let me be clear, disruption is not a negative per se. Everyone says disruption, oh, that's bad. I think disruption sometimes is healthy. Disruption can bring to new thinkings. And as you said, don't talk about automotive anymore. I have another with A, that's aerospace and defense. We all understand why that might be an industry that is now a lot of investment going, but the way how they approach topics is breathtaking. Let's not stay with A only. Let's look at age, healthcare, or high tech. There will be two other to mention. So it's definitely around those four. I see most of the positive disruption with pressure. absolutely. There's negative parts on it, but we should not let us take away with the negative part of disruption. I think disruption also helps us to think about how to do things different and in new ways. So those would be my favorites currently.
Do you see differences between highly regulated industries, which normally are those one who are not as free as others in their decisions and their developments, and
I
those
do,
fast-moving
and
ones?
sometimes it's even inside industries. Take life sciences.
Mhm.
Of course, there's a difference on where you are in that value chain, but regulations can be cumbersome. But again, here, I think automation, the way how technology can help today to do what is needful, especially if you are in areas where you have to do with medicine or drugs for people, you want to be sure what you do. There again, the ability also to test, the ability to also to document, the ability to actually again and again rethink about your parameters that are important is now on a complete different level. You couldn't even get the people or pay the people. Now, I'm not saying that automation is replacing that. Again, I think the adult in the room is needed, but you can throw a decent amount of good technology at some of the regulated industries and get faster.
Where do you see industry learning from each other? Are there kind of cross-industry trends? You mentioned that the line is blurring, obviously. You see industries merging or using business models of each other. What are kind of the examples that you like the most there and the trends that you see there?
So one of them I'm currently very busy in is, of course, on everything around retail. Has to do with the consumer. Now, retail, you can look at, I'm a retailer, but now go further in the entire value chain where consumer products and retail is coming closer together. Look at companies who actually need retail as a function. And that doesn't mean that you need now, let's go back. No, I shouldn't talk about automotive, I heard. But in other industries where you have to do with the consumer, you need some of those functions. And this is where things come together. Or take hospitality together, of course, with everything we see around high tech currently. This is super important if you think about what is doable. So I could go on, and that is part of the job to find out where are capabilities that you don't need to reinvent again and again, and for sure not 25 times.
We always speak about change and disruption and new things. Is there stability somewhere? Do you see an industry that's remains stable, where you say, hey, these guys have been doing that for very long, and probably there is slight improvements here and there, but the industry is not disrupted, so to speak. Is that existent in the world?
I love that question. Now, I would argue everyone, to answer the question, will think about, oh, hey, let's take oil and gas or mining. But even there, yes, that the basic principles to dig something out and to produce energy might be still the same. But the way how they actually need to collaborate, take mill mining and again the automotive industry, EV batteries. This is so interlinked on the value chain from a documentation, from a regulation, from sustainability, but from availability that yes, you still might do part of your business the same, but you need to rethink all the business processes around how you collaborate, how you look at the evolution in the market, how you look at disruptions that we currently see, and true disruptions are like, I don't know what happens tomorrow, the type of disruption. Those are things that I think every industry is affected, while maybe some of the core business could be very strong and optimized.
And now turning the question around, Sven, we spoke about industries that might not be that disrupted. Do you see an industry with the highest appetite? Say where you say, okay, that business, those businesses in these industries, they love that disruption is their nature. Do you see that?
So it's on say automotive. Now let's take healthcare. And healthcare is something which is, of course, we know the growing population, the need also longevity is a new trend. For example, if I'm in healthcare, if I don't understand what that truly means, next to the buzzwords of longevity, which everyone would technically or personally agree is a positive thing, but what does that mean for healthcare? And I mean not the classical view of a hospital, like healthcare as a life science style, as a longevity. And those are fundamental changes in that industry. It also comes from the other angle, which we all know, that's funding. How would we pay for that? And how would actually that be consumed in a way that we still can pay for it as person, as civilization? So this is definitely one of the more disrupted industries, I see.
But I think what all industries have in common is the players within this industry behave differently or have their own strategy or not. Yeah, they are just looking for them. Because I see, for example, if you talk about automotive industry, because it is so prominent at the moment, there are some companies now who react to what's happening at the moment with the classic budget cutting. Yeah, they say like, okay, in security, we have to keep our money together. We are careful and we will observe what's happening. Others say within the same industry, no, now it's a moment where I have to, of course, to differentiate maybe a little bit more, because some want to go out of that automotive only niche and become a little bit more diversified, but say, I have to spend now, I have to be now prepared, and I have to do now especially those steps that normally when there is a boom time, I maybe have not the internal resources to do. Yeah, so this is exactly the time to do digitalization and so on and so on. This kind of motivation, do you see certain companies, certain characteristics, certain industries where this is more prominent than others? And do you see where, let's call it, the necessities or the ambitions and the execution are not really together?
Yeah, interesting point that I observe is always where there's pressure, there's change. And then that might be has something to do with us personally, right? We don't want to change if everything runs smooth. We would maybe like to accelerate, optimize on what we know. Taking that to an industry does mean there always needs to be either a disruptor or a player who has strength. Let's talk about that example very concretely. If you take the collaborative data ecosystems along a value chain, there might be not an interest of any of those players in different industries to say, well, here, take my data. But if there's disruption, could it be actually that little ship? Could it be actually, unfortunately, what we see, disruption in the supply chain due to war? Could we see that completely turn around how business is made in the world? That causes reaction. And that also calls sometimes for a player in an industry to step up and say, we need to get better. We need to get faster. We need to get more predictive. But predictive in times like these is also a hard thing. But that does still mean I need, like in automotive, some of the OEMs picking up the battle and say, no, now we're creating those data ecosystems to openly and collaborative exchange our data due to many reasons, by the way, efficiency, availability, less disruption in the supply chain, or sustainability, whatever it means. And that is actually something where I happen to believe that there are some industries thinking further. High tech is another one. It is not, well, everyone sees those videos of YouTube about what is happening in robotics. And some,
Scary.
I'll maybe give you that idea.
It's amazing.
Go back 2 years, how those robots were active. Now we had the first co-marathon of robots. Like there are certain milestones that you see in evolution there, or micro robotics. Those are topics that are amazing. We just don't tend to go back and see how fast we already come.
I mean, great examples. I just got my new company car, and what's interesting now, everything seems to become a subscription. You buy the car, and then right, you have to subscribe to the maps. You have to subscribe to these, to the functions,
which
yes.
is an absolutely
Yes.
awful strategy.
It
I hate
is.
it, and car manufacturers are rolling back because that's one of the worst ideas they ever had. Yeah.
Well, probably from a business making perspective, it's a good idea, right?
Probably
but,
yes.
Yeah, but Sven, speaking of this example, is there any great examples that you think that where you were really surprised about what happened, how an industry approached its transformation, or the ideas that maybe came out of an industry, maybe using that automotive as an example?
Indeed, but first I quote someone here from the call, Mr. Alexander Greb, who said, "Is cloud truly cheaper?" It's not, by the way. So we go for a subscription. Standardization has a price, and I think specifically where we see the ability of certain players and industries, entire industries or companies, to standardize faster than someone else, and then maybe focus their resources, their thoughts, their brains on that differentiation. Those are the ones who win. And one of our, and I mentioned it before, something that surprised me truly is also based on the collaboration of some players there. And one of the most prominent is, of course, NVIDIA, is where, and I mentioned it before, where it was prohibitive to think along those lines. Why are we applying and trying and trial and error so much in industries, in our businesses, even in our companies, if we could have that as a digital twin, a true sense? And I co-innovated with customers, again, automotive industry, completely paperless, completely in the cloud, manufacturing companies where maybe in our first recording, people, never is going to happen. Now, thinking about that idea of the digital twin, and we just had Hannover Messe International not long ago, to see how you can steer and how you not only can analyze, but how you can steer based on that technology. That is amazing. And I didn't see that coming as fast. Again, we discussed it, we tried it out. It was price prohibitive. Did work in some niche areas for sure. But I would argue if we do another recording in 5 years, if we're still around, I think we're going to talk a lot about that ability to copy everything that we have, manage it in a digital twin, and really evaluate impact.
When we talk about industries are disrupted and everything is changing and so on, of course, this has to have massive effects on SAP and how SAP develops and also markets its solutions. What role do industry plays in that context in SAP's overall strategy today? And how did the industry strategy of SAP evolve in the last 20 years?
There's one good thing, and that is definitely super, super stable. It all comes from collaborating between us as a vendor together with the ecosystem and the customers. So we used to call it co-innovation for a very long time. I should have trademarked it like 20 years ago. Oops, now I'm an old one. So collaboration is the essence of understanding what is happening in industries, and that's a stable part. So again, you asked me for SAP, a product manager role that looks at what's happening as a product marketer in the market, collaborates with engineering, developing a platform like we have with the business technology platform, understanding the meaningfulness of data. If that is existing, what is then the differentiation from one to the other? Is exactly knowing a business process or actually also an industry specific topic. And we have seen that, right? We have seen where business processes were like linear from one step to the other. Now it comes into networks itself back for a complete different approach. Understanding business functions in companies. I can be a super expert. I love T-shaped models of careers, by the way. You have an expertise where you stand for. Let's say you understand finance, but you need to look above the cubicle line. You need to look left and right, and not only how you can control, but how you can help and support to do better procurement, to do better supply chain, to do better asset usage. Those are examples where I see that that is something where we need to keep investing, and we can't do that all as SAP. And that's why the ecosystem around, like You from the partner ecosystem, like customers itself who co-innovate with us, it's still the essence. And that's also not so simple. It's sometimes easier said than done because the sky's the limit. You could co-innovate on nearly everything. But you also need, and I think we went there with the Industry Cloud program, good learnings, how a good platform, 80% of those solutions were done by the partners because they understand it, they want to have it. And by the way, which is super important, and Johannes is going to like it, they also want to adopt it. They not just want to develop it and be happy, and that is anyhow not the case today, but they want to adopt it and want it to be used.
How do you maintain the standardization aspect? If you say, okay, we're giving out like a lot of responsibility to the ecosystem. You mentioned that a lot of 80% of the applications were developed by partners. How do you maintain consistency there? I think that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it?
It is. Now, again, a little bit of marketing. 80% of the worldwide GDP runs to SAP systems. Second, and that is my way of saying it, as long as something is produced, even if it's a service, is shipped or brought to the customer or paid, there is a need for that core. So it touches that core. So I think that's an opportunity, but also an obligation. So understanding how classical topics, procurement, logistics, finance, supply chain, assets, or everything around people, there are fundamentals who need to be in place. Now, the differentiation to build on top, I learned, and there might be others who even definitely for doing it better, and I would love to listen from the listeners how they approach it. I think it comes to the guardrails of technology. So how far can you bury yourself again into a rat hole and don't get out? So standardization on the way how you approach, how open do you want to be? And second, it comes from the case itself, right? So there are super complex co-innovations that we need to do in certain industries. You're regulated, you mentioned, of course, already starting on a different level. Disruption, we discussed about. But these are the topics that define the guardrails. And that is something where you need a partner, and could be a customer IT department, an ecosystem partner, who understands the value of non-complexity. What I mean by that is we were coming out of an industry who actually loved complexity. We, if I go back my early times, ERP, and still know what it means, was a toolbox. You can literally do everything that you want. And this shift towards non-complexity, to standardization, to software as a service, to take some of the buzzwords, that is where you have a mindset topic. And that's where it boils down. So technology, the way how you understand the processes, the key centerpiece is mindset. What do you want to develop, and how often and how intensive do you want it to be used? And I think, again, AI will help us there. Because if AI flows, it is based on standardization.
I think there was this slogan, "Run simple." So maybe another thing that we were ahead of time, weren't we?
Maybe I'm not in marketing, so in that sense, run simple always has a timestamp and a context. I don't think companies are simple. There are areas definitely where you can simplify. It's just not black and white. But I love also the ability to develop and to help to develop, and being part of an endeavor where you create a certain amount of capabilities that if you leverage them with a good methodology, then you can already do a lot way. You do some miles, right? And it's not like you need to stop at every corner and look back, but you understand, yeah, well, if 80% of the world uses that, why not? Why am I so good? Why not?
But let me put the finger a little bit into that run simple wound, because I think you can have had the same experience in the past. Industry specifics were always a killer argument or an excuse, for systems modification and for deviation from the standard, because they said, for our industry we need more than just the standard. Now we know that the clean core, and fit to standard is ultra relevant for building future-proof architectures and move to the cloud. The question here is, of course, where do you see that thin line that organizations should walk?
Yeah. Good question again. I personally think first do your homework. What I mean by that, tidy up where you don't need to leave a mess. It's like if you have children's, well, meanwhile, the wireless password is the ultimate strength of managing your family. They will tidy up their room if it's not available. What I mean by that, you need to raise the bar. And if I look at methodologies that we use, and you might know, and some might know that I'm very close to the SAP Activate methodology, it starts with those ready-to-run business. And I've seen that even geographical differences to simplify for the sake of time in Asia was given the standard, we can do complex later. And maybe we never do, but we want to be fast, fast, fast. In other industries, it was like this manufacture, the German word manufacture. It was like, oh yeah, we need to be super, super slick, super, super different. And I don't think the one is better than the other. It's just super different. Now, if I look at the methodology, start with ready-to-run businesses, then think about what methodology helps your business today. By the way, codify everything where you deviate, because you don't want the next Sven, Alexander, or Johannes come in and reinvent the old thing again. And then leverage everything that you can do for running better, tools that are there for adopting. Because only when you adopt, then the rubber hits the road. And technology-wise, that means use extensibility where you have internal barriers for acceptance, like where there are still the people saying, no, I'm sorry, we need to do it this way, or the even worse one, we always did it that way.
Yeah.
The latter one could be overcome, I think, with time. But have something to offboard the people who stand in your way to really run better.
When we open up Sven's transformation playbook, and we would ask you what your top 3 best practices for organizations to transform from ECC, often stuck in legacy processes, to a digital industry champion would be. What would be those top 3?
So actually, I just mentioned them. Think about where you can standardize, where you can use more standardized business processes, but think further, think above the cubicle line, think about your value chain. Where can you connect with everything that comes in, everything that goes out, everything that is in the middle? Leverage a standardization playbook that is accepting one of my learnings and surprises. Good projects only work if between 20 or 30% you invest into change management, because it's ultimately a mindset topic. It's a mindset inside your company. It's a mindset outside, by the way. How ecosystem players try to convince you what to do, how vendors like SAP. So 20 to 30% change management is ultimate. And find enough space also to test AI, for example, how use new tools, how to define your landscape, architecture-wise, business process-wise, and usage-wise. So that triangle, those will be the topics.
You spoke about mindset and things that company should embrace, and I can only echo that. I think a core element of making a transformation successful is mindset and change. But we always keep speaking about things. Hey, this is what you should do, what you should embrace. Do you have any don'ts for the audience, like things the customers and people that are affected by transformation shouldn't do?
The worst practices.
The worst practice, indeed.
Yeah, the worst practice is do it yourself. That's what you should do as Joe Lumber when you're at home in your garden. There, do it yourself. It's fun. And even, by the way, your wife might like it or not. That is the regulator. That's a CFO. But what I mean by that, don't think that you have all the knowledge. Be open to learn. And learn does mean, again, How did others do it? Where did they fail? And that's the beauty of the ecosystem, right? We are representatives of a huge ecosystem who actually runs 80% of the worldwide GDP, and it's not a marketing gig, something we need to be proud of. If we leverage that ecosystem, then it's right. So staying in your bubble, doing it yourself, those were the don't do's. Do you need to believe to every other one's marketing claim for fame or the way how they think they did it right? No, but be also educated enough to challenge what you hear. And that's a little bit where you need to do your bets. And bets come from experience, come from also maybe sometimes not having an experience, because it could not always be a good experience. Try out some things, but in an unregulated way. By the way, the anecdote I'm happy to share is how I learned how important and interesting AI would be. You want to hear it?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
I thought so. And actually, it's from a colleague out of the industry organization. He told me that story. It's a true story, but tells a lot how I currently look at AI and taught me a lot what to take care of. And it is as follows: at the Saturday at the breakfast, his father, more than 80 years old, picks up the phone and types something in and looks for actually what's the bite for fishing at the lake close to his home. That's in the Netherlands. And there comes an answer. So 3 things we learned from that. Number 1, of course, it was ChatGPT at the time, by the way. So number 1, technology will be used by everyone if it's convenient, no matter what we think, no matter what security ideas we have, no matter where we think a good idea is. It will be used. Second, there was a response, or someone trained that large language model for fishing in a lake 40 kilometers somewhere close to where it lived. So someone gave information for free. The most important learning is number 3. He understands that what comes out of that response makes sense. I would have fully accepted it. I would have sitting 5 hours at that lake and nothing happens. Maybe that's the idea of fishing, which I can't comply to with the amount of coffee I drink, but maybe that's the idea. But he was the adult in the room who judged that outcome. And those are the 3 learnings. It will be there. Someone will pay the price, and someone needs to be the adult in the room to understand. And that is something where us all 3, and a lot of the listeners, we have the necessity and the obligation, as we run not toy shops, we run significant businesses. Where do we apply that technology is super important. And that is something, back to your question, where I think those learnings sometimes also get faster. I love teams putting them together out of different knowledges, but I always hope there's an adult in the room.
So the learning out of that is not so different from what we basically already had with Web 2.0. Yeah, where you also, of course, have to look where's the beef. Yeah, what's in there, what's not in there, what's just fluff. Same thing in AI, probably.
True. Now, the amount of disruption, and we just heard it, I think yesterday it was, where someone from a company A told, hey, usage of company G is less, and because everyone goes to C. I think I made the right analogies. It is just look at my kids or their friends or going to schools, what they use. This is how you can learn. And that's what I mean, that speed, the convenience is something that is much more there. Web 2.0, I agree with you, but there were still some geeks around who actually understood it better than others. I think today, my kids are older, but if I have younger kids, I always tell them there are 2 things you need to be good in. And both has to start with an M, math or Mandarin. Then you're on the good side. And math, equally important, most important, I think, because that defines if you stand in front or behind the algorithms, if you understand what's happening there. Those are differentiators. So Johannes, you're the youngest, I guess, in the room. Teach your kids math.
Yes. Yes. Well, I actually lived 3 years in China, so I already kind of complied to the advice.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that things become so easy, and in essence, what you're saying is that IT somehow is commoditized, right? It's a commodity. Is that true from your perspective? And if so, what would that mean for our customers' IT teams? Like, if I look at the IT teams, I would be concerned. Is it?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think necessarily everything gets simpler or easier. Let's mention Web 2.0. At that time, two clever people with a laptop and the internet could do things where you need hundreds of people before, but still, out of those hundreds, 50 survived. So there is a need for certain depth. There's a need for certain skill sets still. I don't think that IT departments get commoditized if there's a big if, and talk with Benny Blau, our chief actually transformation and IT officer. So he understands how the importance of lifelong learning skill set, leveraging that technology needs to change. IT departments always were, I think IT departments were looking what does the business need. Very, very few actually were happy with themselves. And if not, after 5-10 years, someone figured out and then it was a problem. But I think that closeness to business does mean I need to flow with the change speed of business. And this is the challenge. I don't think it's going to go away because we always will leverage more and more technology. Why? Because it's out there and it will be used. And either it comes with the biggest firehorse, which is the consumer way of using things, like the extension of your palm called phone. And no one uses it actually for phoning. For everything else, less, but phoning. But this is where I think one big intrusion comes to those change, and the other one is people who work in IT for long enough, and there are different roles in IT, of course, but they are sometimes the better adult in the room to define the pace. And by the way, not slowing it down, but doing it the right way, because some people give, like, they go 200 miles per hour on the German Autobahn, technically possible, but not healthy. But you don't do that always. You can't. And that is something where I happen to believe, not bringing it back to automotive, but where I happen to believe we need to be cognizant about that adult in the room, that experience, the one who can judge that outcome, because outcome will be more and will be faster.
You were mentioning the SAP ecosystem. And of course, this is for me very relevant as part of the SAP consultant industries, which get its fair share of criticism, quite often, and for sure, for a reason, for maybe not always being the greatest helper for customers to do a successful digitalization, a successful transformation. Because too many have the same issues like also customers have. They are too stuck in the old world. They want to set up and use their old competencies and so on. So what's your opinion on that? If the consultancies are the transmission, are they in the right gear or not?
Some of them, and more. What I mean by that, yes, there is still a business where consultancy is based on what do you want?
Yeah.
I'll do it for you. Or complexity, maybe not a bad thing, because I'm going to repeat many times what I tried once. What I see is, again, the regulation, and I always tell that to my clients, there needs to be a round table, not a square one. And there need to be minimum 3 parties. That is the vendor, the customer, and the consultant. And they need to be from day zero. Why? Because if not, the game starts. But the regulation via the customer, what he accepts to pay, then, by the way, not only in euros or dollars, but to pay in time, is where it starts to regulate. We lived through the times of cloud, where cloud was the buzzword for everything. But there was, in essence, something positive in there. But it wasn't always cheaper. Sometimes everyone said, oh, I only do this way. And then we figure out complexity later. It comes also down to my experience also with Activate was the same. Like we had a methodology and everyone had his own methodology.
Yeah.
But guys, from discover, prepare, explore, realize, the phases are the same. You can call them schnitzel if you want, but the way how you do proper projects and you constantly iterate are not rocket science. And this is again why I said before, there are actually two things. One thing I already mentioned, if there's not in a project plan 20-30% of change management, and it could be a reorganization at SAP, it's actually the same, or in large companies. If there isn't 20 to 30% of your time and invest into change management, and this is where the ecosystem differentiates from a good player to someone who says, uh, I have good buddies and
Technical service, yeah. Absolutely. And that's what I always say with we have to be consultants again. Customers need consultants, not companions, who do everything that you say. And complexity had always in the past the big benefit that you could book a lot of hours on that.
I like
that's
that.
why
I like that. Companions, not consultants.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Maybe another
Thank you
title
very much. Sometimes I always have my awake
the light moments, you say.
Talking about the young people who should be good in math and Mandarin.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the other things that you would, based on your experience, tell a young person who is maybe at the brink of going into a professional life? What are the things in the next 5 years they should concentrate on? Maybe not become an on-premise consultant, I guess, but what should be the one you say, maybe this is something you can build a career upon?
So again, it is pick the right technology savviness. And you can pick that by classical training and understanding technology. You can understand that by applying it. And you can understand that by connecting you with the right people. And I'll give you an example. When I was most concerned in the times we had the last recording where we transformed ECCs to S4 is if there is take an SAP consultant with 30 years experience walking into the room, I know I have a problem. Now, there might be now a good idea to learn from them, but you also need to be careful. Sometimes young people teach them more than they were willing or able to learn themselves. So I think the second topic around applied technology learning to yourself is don't be shy. Don't be shy also to go into projects and to learn from them. And by the way, I'm not a fan on failing fast forward. I'm not a fan of those posters. Every mistake is allowed because unfortunately we live in environments where this is said but not true, my opinion. But find you an environment where you can experiment enough, where people can help you, especially the ones with experience. This is an area, come up with your ideas. And this is where I think learning how to work classical with mentors, with people who give you air cover, with a boss who actually doesn't throw you out of the room with a nasty noise once you said something or tried something.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things you should look at. And those are the people you should be close to, because that learning can't be in a classroom. That learning is life.
Maybe sticking to the recommendations piece and linking this back to the industry, is there one industry where you think that young talents should kind of look at, maybe in a case study, and kind of, because for that industry there might be so many interesting things happening or have happened over the past 10, 20 years that can be a good blueprint how to deal with transformation? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I see it in many, so it would be unfair. But if I need to single out, I would say high tech, definitely. But that may be the geek in me, so it's just cool to see what happens there. It is industries that have proven, take media, where we also consume it ourselves. So understanding something that you consume yourself is actually very motivating. But again, I could go on, and suddenly you're in the 10 industries. But those are areas where I would say, hey, start there and figure out, because at the end, it's all about motivation. The knowledge that we gathered and I gathered in 30 years, and Alex in 20, and Johannes, looking in your eyes, in 10. So very,
I look young.
great guy.
I look young, Sven.
That knowledge is now available at a fingertip, but still you need to have the context. That's where the rubber hits the road. And I would say don't just focus too long on one area or one industry. You need to have a T-shaped model. No, you need to be good in something, and the people need to know you. But once you have achieved a certain degree there, look left and right, learn from there, learn from people, from other industries for sure, as you mentioned.
Talking about opinions, one thing you believe about transformation that most or others would disagree. What is that?
It would still be the amount of change management investment and how you do change management. And again, I went through that personally a lot in our company. I saw that, and that, again, the big pleasure always being attached globally in many regions. That gave me a lot of good insights and fun as well. But it comes down to change management. It is not the way how you do it. It is really the way how you properly plan, the people behind it, the people who really understand to explain awfully right. And again, you know that from your kids, right? If you tell them something, what it's worth, send them to the neighbor. Done.
Yeah.
So you need to understand how change management properly works. And then last but not least, everyone talks about learning and lifelong learning. For me, that's part of that, but it's easier said than done as well.
Great points, Sven. Regarding a lot of people, a lot of industries, as you said, are in the course of change. So new people starting in these industries. If you now would give an advice, we spoke about young talent. What would be your advice for a transformation lead or a CIO that is actually starting today? What should they do next to the change management? Because obviously we understood that's one of the core elements a person should focus on.
Yeah. So I personally think that the CIO, as the manager of change, if he wants to be, needs to again look outside of his company. And topics like I always discuss a lot with other CIOs is look at a startup environment. What can you learn from them? I did it in the industries as well. A great startup program at SAP where we brought young companies even to our events. And yes, out of 5, maybe 2 survive. But you learn a lot from that new thinking. That is something which, if I don't see it on the map of a CIO, I said, maybe not good. And that goes along like with university alliances, like looking at something around that angle. So learn from others that are actually super fast or super convinced, like startups, or someone who does that for his living because he has a PhD in how to properly decode things in universities. The second one I would argue is don't run too fast after all the new geeks. And what I mean by that, and we've seen that when the infrastructure as a play came, everyone is saying, oh, let's rip out and let's go there. But hey, 2, maybe 3 years later, you understand what it means and what it means also for your company, which is important. But you always need to have that context. Those would be not advices. Those would be learnings that I have when I say I've seen good things happening if people do things.
Yeah, I do agree. Looking beyond, I think that would be the headline, right? Look beyond and learn. Stay curious, indeed. So if you had a billboard that every enterprise leader would see tomorrow morning, what would it say, Sven?
Fasten seatbelts.
Fasten the seatbelt and stay curious. I think this is a great closing also for the episode, right, Alex?
Absolutely. And our last question, like always, is when people want to get in contact with you, where can they meet you? Because it's a lot of events coming up with Sapphire and so on. And on which social media channels are you best approached?
So LinkedIn, absolutely it is. That's the network I'm using so long and get a lot of. the network, right? It's not only messaging, it's also a lot of feedback. I love it, as it has a certain degree of professionalism. And yes, events are other, like with the industry advisory or the industry-specific events, I would always argue are good ones. Our premier flagship events. I love, meanwhile, to go to the smaller ones also from the ecosystem, because again, I think there is a lot of good knowledge out there. But yeah, the simplest one is follow me on LinkedIn if there and you find something meaningful and interesting, or you disagree, ping me.
Great.
Thank you, Sven.
Fax doesn't work anymore.
We will try that out. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for
Sven.
having me, Johannes. Alex, always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.